Thanks to Kyle Jolliffe, we're from Toronto, Canada. We're delighted to have him back again today. And his presentation is titled Ocean Liners at the Great Port of New York City. Thank you, Kyle, for being here, and we can't wait to hear all about it.
Thanks very much, Helen. Pleased to be here today. Ocean Liners and the Great Port of New York City is an epic story. It's about the seafaring nations of Europe tradition of being transformed by steel and the technologies of the modern industrial age, with as a backdrop the beckoning great metropolis of New York City and its vast hinterland of the United States. Here's a nice shot of that great metropolis from a ocean liner about 1940. Here's a brief geography lesson. Ocean liners come up to Lower Manhattan through the lower bay of New York Harbor. You'll see in the picture on the right, we have the Ambrose Channel marked, which is 53 feet deep, 2,000 feet wide, and over 15 miles long. The little finger at the bottom of that photo is the Sandy Hook spit of land. Here's an early postcard from about 1909 of a ship passing through the Sandy Hook area. I'm not sure if it's going out to sea or coming in from the sea. We also see the Sandy Hook Lighthouse. Here's a lovely oil painting, possibly by Charles Edward Dixon, a British maritime painter, showing the pilot being dropped off to help guide the ship in. One of the Cunard liner steamers from the 1890s. Also in the lower New York Harbor is the Ambrose Channel Lightship. Now it's a fixed tower, but for many years it was a boat station there. Occasionally there were collisions. You can understand the danger that the crew of that ship faced with fog conditions and sometimes very large ships. Here is the RMS Olympic, over 46,000 tons, passing the Ambrose Channel Lightship. If you go to the South Street Seaport Museum in New York City, you can see one of those lightships docked there. Of course, public health has always been a concern with respect to the people coming in on the ocean liners. I was particularly concerned at the turn of the last century. Cholera was a danger. There was cholera cases found on a German ship in 1910. A number of those passengers were taken off the ship and they died at this hospital. We also see in this card on the top Ellis Island. This is Swinburne Island today. It's really just a nature preserve with a few derelict buildings left. The mail boat went out to pick up mail from the incoming ships to help speed up the delivery of mail while the ships were waiting to clear quarantine. This is a lovely card, Max Jaffe card, part halftone, part collotype. The photograph was taken by Percy Loomis Spare. Not well known, but he's really considered well-known street photographer. He also did harbor scenes between about 25,000 and 45,000 cards between the 1920s and the 1940s. You can find examples of his work on eBay quite easily. So once the ships cleared the lower New York Bay, they came into the vast harbor of New York City, free from ocean storms and free from ice. You can see one of the ocean liners arriving here with Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island in the background. You also see in the foreground some of the piers and some of the Hudson River boats, which went on day cruises up to Albany. I like this card. There's quite a bit of artistic license here. The emigrant ships, when they got to New York, there would be a customs inspection on board. The first and second class passengers would be cleared, and then the steerage passengers would be taken from where the ship docked in Manhattan or Hoboken. They'd be taken to Ellis Island in a ferry like the one shown on the left of this photograph. So this is a German cigarette card from about 1909. Of course, there was a vast hinterland of travel agents that fed customers to the different steamship companies. This is an advertising card for the White Star Line and a number of its ocean liners, the Britannic, the Germanic, the Adriatic, and the Celtic. Sets out the different kinds of accommodation available, ranging from, first class and second class and steerage, and tries to make it as attractive as possible. This is one of the German ocean liners, very large, 420 first class, 254 second class, 223 third class, and 1,765 steerage passengers and 577 crews, so 688 feet long. So by this time, the first decade of the 20th century, the ships had gotten extremely large, very busy, migrant trade, over 22,000 tons in gross tons weight. This is Ellis Island, a lovely card by the Rotograph Company about 1905. See the main building of Ellis Island. Ellis Island had been opened in 1892, replacing earlier facilities on the mainland, and subsequently expanded. We can see I guess we call it the Great Hall of Ellis Island as well. This is a slide of the registry room at Detroit photographic card. The registry room was the final stage in the processing of immigrants. They could process as many as 11,000 immigrants in a day. And on the right is a nice shot by Lewis Hine showing the people leaving the registry room, climbing into America. Their trepidation is over. About 2% of the immigrants brought in on these big liners were rejected. The rest embarked on the new experience of America. The German liners before the First World War were located on the Hoboken side of the Hudson. This is a picture of the Hamburg American Line piers in Hoboken. This is a picture of the same general area, but looking from the Manhattan side. On the left, we can see some of those German liners. On the right, we can see a real photo card showing these liners once they'd been seized by the United States in 1917 and then turned into troop ships, renamed with American names such as the von Steuben and the George Washington. Here's a lovely white border card of an aerial view of the Port of New York, just showing the enormous number of piers on the Hudson River side. The piers in the foreground towards the right are the ferry docks. There were also quite a few piers on the East River side, below and above the Brooklyn Bridge. Some beautiful cards of the docks. I don't know the artist for the card on the left, but for the card on the right, that's Rachel Elmer Robinson. Her cards come in two series of about 6 cards each. Very collectible. Tragically, she died in the 1918 influenza epidemic. She was a very talented commercial illustrator. This is West Street on the Hudson River, on the Manhattan Hudson River side, showing again about a rotograph card from about 1905, showing all the busy horse-drawn vehicles in front of the various terminals. One of those terminals was for one of the railway companies. Their passengers from the west would get off on the New Jersey shore and then take a ferry over to New York City. The American Line docks about 1907. Again, a scene of real busyness. And also, other river traffic, sailing ships and tugs and ferries. Boarding the steamer, an 1897 card, part of the American Souvenir Card Company and their patrographic brand. They did a number of series of American cities. This is their series of voyage from New York to Europe, and it shows people boarding a ship on the New York side. These are the Cunard Line docks, also known as the Chelsea Piers on the Manhattan Hudson River side. The ship in the foreground is the ill-fated Lusitania, which was torpedoed by a German U-boat in 1915, causing a great deal of pain and anguish, and no doubt contributed to the U.S. entering the First World War in 1917. Red Star Line was a Belgian-American company that ran ships between New York and Antwerp. Notable passengers were Albert Einstein and Irving Berlin. But Irving Berlin was a very young child. So this is one of their ships arriving at the Red Star Pier, being assisted by some tugs, and in the distance we can also see a sailing ship and a ferry. New York City was a very congested harbor. A nice, lovely chromolithograph card. There were also coastal steamers such as the Savannah Line, which went to Georgia, luxurious coastwise steamers. This was long before airline travel, that's for sure. The White Star Line docks about 1904, another lovely Detroit photographic card. I should say that I didn't really set out to collect all these cards. Most of them came to me as part of my general interest in collecting New York City cards, such as this one. This is the White Star Line docks looking south. We can see faintly towards the right of the card the entrance to that particular pier, and faintly we can make a White Star Line. And sadly, this is where the Titanic would have docked, except for the iceberg it hit. The survivors were picked up by the SS Carpathia and taken to one of the White Star Line piers here. And here's the White Star Line docks today. A lot of these docks on the Manhattan side or the North River side fell into disrepair and were demolished. Some were saved and repurposed for things like recreation centers. But here they've saved the doorway where we can see more clearly that White Star Line outlined on the steel frame under the half dome section. An American line ship, the SS New York, built 1888, almost 11,000 gross tons. The original ships of the Black Ball Line, which started transatlantic service in 1817 to England, were about 400 to 500 tons. This marks the raising of the American flag on the SS New York by President Harrison. Another American line ship, the SS Philadelphia, built 1889, 10,499 gross tons. The Statue of Liberty is almost without exception in the background of these cards. Partly that's how I distinguish them as a New York City card, but it's just, I think, such an essential symbol of New York. It appears in all these cards, and also gives the pictures a little bit of a compositional quality to them, compositional feature for them. Another American line ship, the SS St. Louis, built 1894, 11,629 gross tons. The picture on the right is of the SS St. Louis when it's docked in New York, so you can get a kind of a sense of the size of these ships. You know, the later ships were much larger, but these were still large ships in their own right. This is the SS Kronland, built 1902, 12,760 gross tons, then the largest U.S. steamship ever built. I think it was scrapped in the 1920s. This is the SS Momus, which was part of the Morgan Line. It was built for trade between New York City and New Orleans. Momus is actually the name of the King of Mardi Gras in New Orleans. A nice shot of it off Battery Park under steam. It's part passenger ship and part cargo ship, as you can see from the cranes at the back of the ship and also at the front of the ship. This is a nice real photo card of the SS Orizaba, part of the Ward Line, which traveled between New York City and Cuba. Another shot off Battery Park. A smaller ship at 7,652 gross tons. This is the Italian ship, the SS Duca di Genova, built 1907, almost 8,000 gross tons, torpedoed in 1918. Unfortunately, the ocean liners became pawns in the First World War and also the Second World War. But a lovely card, again showing the Statue of Liberty in the background as a compositional feature. This is a slide of the French line ship La Provence by the artist Fred Pansing, showing Midtown Manhattan and some tugs and one of the ferry boats and a sailing ship in the background. Lovely card. This is a scene on the SS La Savoie, perhaps with people going out on deck to see the Statue of Liberty as the ship approached New York, the piers where it would dock. The SS France, built 1912, 24,666 gross tons. This would have been sold to passengers on the ship, like some of the other cards. Has postcard in a total of 7 languages on the back of the ship. The TSS Rotterdam, a Dutch ship built in 1908, a little over 24,000 tons, with the Brooklyn Bridge in the background and the Statue of Liberty and a number of sailing ships and tugs and ferries. RMS Oceanic, built 1899, a little over 17,000 tons. For 2 years, the largest ship in the world, another White Star Line card. Here it's leaving New York City with Statue of Liberty in the background. The RMS Cedric, RMS stands for Royal Mail Ship, built 1902, a little over 21,000 gross tons, and the largest ship in the world. That was one of the cards on that, one of the ships mentioned on that early advertising card we looked at from the Oregon travel agent. Of course, the RMS Lusitania, maiden voyage in 1907, a little over 31,000 gross tons, torpedoed in 1915. It's the card of it being welcomed to New York City. The RMS Lusitania, a night scene showing a tender next to the ship, perhaps delivering supplies. The Battery Park area in the background. Very powerful, very long ship, 790 feet long. This is the RMS Aquitania, built in 1913, 45,647 gross tons. And of course, press reporters and press photographers played a role in the saga of the great ocean liners that came to New York City. The couple on the right are Dean Sage, collector of wild animals, and his wife, Anne Muntilney. They were just coming back from a part hunting expedition and part scientific expedition to Western China and Sichuan. And my father, who was then a high school student in Chengdu, who wanted to be a journalist, collected their autographs. This is the RMS Mauritania, built in 1906, over 31,000 tons. Sister ship of the Lusitania. This is actually a tuck card in one of their series of great liners, not rather than the card issued by, say, the Cunard line for sale to passengers. The RMS Olympic of the White Star Line, largest British steamer at New York, built in 1910, off Battery Park. Instead of looking towards Battery Park, it's looking away from it. The circular building in the foreground at the left is Castle Garden, which at one time was an immigration station. The ocean liner companies employed menus with menu cards that for the days, one of the meals of the day, you could tear off the card from the menu. So I believe this probably comes from a voyage in December of 1907. A wonderful card which shows the tremendous activity in the harbor as the ship approaches. I don't know where this painting currently is. Another Cunard menu card showing another one of its liners approaching New York City, almost as if it's going to collide with the Statue of Liberty, but to my knowledge, it didn't, nor did any other ship collide with that. It was the Statue of Liberty. Just a splendid card. Here's a reproduction of an advertising postcard for about 1908 for the so-called Kaiser class of ocean liners, named after the Kaiser or member of his family. These were North German Lloyd ships. The SS Kaiser Wilhelm de Grosse, built in 1897, first ocean liner sunk in World War I, an unfortunate distinction. This is the Kaiser Wilhelm II, built in 1903, one of the ships seized by the American government and became the USS Agamemnon. This is the SS Crown Princess Cecile, built in 1906, almost 20,000 gross tons. Also seized became the USS Mount Vernon and part of the U.S. Naval Reserve Fleet after World War One. I think it was eventually scrapped. It was too old to be put back into active service during World War II. This is a transparency card, a version of Hold the Light cards of the SS Deutschland, built in 1900, passing the Statue of Liberty. This is the SS Imperator, built in 1912, over 50,000 tons, then the largest ship in the world. It had a German eagle on the bow of the ship that fell off in a storm, also seized by the Americans during the First World War. This is the SS Berengaria, the ex-Imperator, the same image without the German eagle at the front. SS Leviathan, ex-SS Fatherland, another seized ship built in 1913, over 54,000 tons as a troop ship. I think this card would have been sold to the returning troops on the ship. Here's a similar card, but it's showing the troops on the battleship entering New York harbor. They would have been packed like sardines in the ship, but I'm sure they were glad to finally be home about 1919. The RMS Majestic, built between 1913 and 1922, over 56,000 gross tons, then the largest steamship in the world. In the 1920s, the Americans tightened their immigration requirements, so tourists to some degree replaced immigrants on these ships. So this is a card from a Cunard Line agent promoting vacation trips to Europe during the year 1927. After the First World War, there were American Liberty ships that were repurposed as ocean liners by the United States lines. This is the SS President Garfield. What's also notable about this card is that it was painted by Willie Stower, who before the First World War was part of the German Imperial Court as a favorite artist, did many maritime scenes of German ships, many historical paintings. He obviously, after the First World War, with the German imperial family deposed, lost one of his best clients, so had to turn elsewhere for work. A lovely, lovely card indeed. The Royal Mail Steamer Ohio, built between 1914 and 1920, a British ship, almost 19,000 gross tons, and again seized as part of reparations for the First World War, the ex-SS München. The ocean liner traffic, of course, went up and down the coast as well as between New York and Europe. This is one of the Caribbean service ships, the SS Carabobo of the Red D Line, which traveled to Puerto Rico, Curacao, and Venezuela. A combination cargo and freight ship. Combination cargo and passenger ship, rather. Of course, the French were very proud of their famous line of the Normandy, and this postal stationery card was issued for a major philatelic exhibition in New York City in 1939. So it's a card for someone who's both a stamp collector and a postcard collector, or either one. The Normandy, the influence of the Normandy was such that there was a dinner theater production at the French casino called Maiden Trip of the Normandy. And here's a postcard of the ship and members of the cast. The SS Bremen, one of the great ocean liners of the 1930s, very technologically advanced ship. The plane in the foreground is the catapult plane, which was launched at about 250 miles off the American coast to help speed up mail delivery. This is a copy of a cover catapulted by the Heinkel D-1717 seaplane on July 22nd, 1929, just before the ship arrived in New York City, sent to an address on the Upper West Side. Travel posted for the Bremen after 1933. The Bremen, when it docked in New York City during the Nazi years, also drew a lot of protests. The Queen Mary docked opposite Midtown Manhattan. You can really see just how long this ship was, at over 1,018 feet. I've never seen the ship, but perhaps some of you have it in Long Beach, where it's now docked. The Dutch ship SS New Amsterdam, built in 1937 at over 36,000 gross tons. three largest ships in the world as war refugees in 1940. When war broke out, as it turned out, they were able to take refuge in New York City. This is the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mary, and the Normandy. And we all, I'm sure, know sadly that the Normandy burned at the pier in, I think it was 1942, and was not deemed salvageable. Terrible loss. But fortunately, they had offloaded a lot of the Art Deco furnishings in the ship. And some of those are in museum collections in the United States. Queen Mary is a troop ship. This is a card that would have been distributed to returning troops after the Second World War in camouflage paint, I'm sure. Luxury liner row in the 1950s showing various American and European ships. The SS Stockholm built in 1948 at over 12,000 gross tons. Before and after colliding with the Andrea Doria in 1956. The Andrea Doria, as you probably know, didn't survive the collision. Cristoforo Colombo, an Italian ship built in 1953, kind of looks like a yacht, slightly under 30,000 gross tons, sister ship of the Andrea Doria, lovely real photo card. SS Liberté, a French ship which was taken over from the Germans after the Second World War, passing in front of the Statue of Liberty. The SS United States, which has, of course, been in the news lately, it's finally going to meet its fate. Over 53,000 tons and the fastest ocean liner ever. Last New York sailing of the Queen Elizabeth in 1968, after traveling 3.5 million miles in 30 years. Last New York sailing of the QE2 in 2008, this card was sold on board the Queen Mary 2. This is the picture, of course, of the Queen Mary 2. So the magic still lives on. You can sometimes take eastbound or westbound passages on the Queen Mary 2. What we've seen so far are pictures of ocean liners or related cards in the New York City harbor and approaching New York City or leaving New York City. But as a companion piece to this presentation, I did an article in Postcard History last year, which talks about the lesser known vessels in the New York harbor, such as this one, which was one of the Ellis Island ferry boats in the 1920s. Other such vessels are tugs for railroad barges from New Jersey to Manhattan, coal barges that brought coal from Pennsylvania to New York City, fire boats, and so on. So as extra reading, if you're so inspired, you can take a look at Postcard History. So I have one last part to my presentation. I'm going to read from a book entitled The Great Sport by the British travel writer Jan Morris, who has a chapter devoted to ocean liners. And she has these two paragraphs concluding her chapter on ocean liners. Once I saw the old Queen Elizabeth, the biggest of all of the liners, pass by in this way. I was alone on the shore of Governor's Island in the shadow of an old fort the British built. It was a wonderfully clear autumn morning. The city seemed far away. The harbor looked empty. The only noises were the swish of the water, occasional cars, and shouts from the Coast Guard station behind me and the airplanes above. Nowhere in the world can be more brilliant on such a day. The air more vibrant with life and chance. The sky more vast. It makes the spirits sing. In this frame of mind, I was looking out across the upper bay, thinking elevated and affectionate thoughts, when suddenly around the corner of the fort appeared the Queen Elizabeth. She looked out of scale at first, too big even for that setting. Like a child's drawing of a ship beside a cardboard castle, she seemed to be utterly deserted, nobody apparently on her decks, no one to be seen on her bridge. She made no audible sound, but as thin vapor streamed from her funnels, the water foamed at her prow, and she appeared to be flying out to sea. I had never thought her to be a beautiful ship, but she looked ethereally beautiful that morning. 80,000 tons, of her leaping, unmanned, silent, exultantly through New York Bay. It was like prematurely seeing the ghost of a ship, or the ghost perhaps of all the great liners that have frequented this seaport, each prouder than the one before, all exultant in their day. And that concludes my presentation of these cards. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle, very much.
Hal Ottaway said, who was the photographer who made those 25,000 postcards? Can you explain a little bit what you meant?
That's Percy Loomis Spare. He photographed partly in a contract with the New York Public Library. Sometimes the buildings were being torn down, many street scenes, many harbor scenes. One can Google his name at SPERR on eBay and see many examples of his work, or there's some articles on the internet as well. But he had a nice deft touch in what he photographed. There's some of the other Max Jaffe cards have Percy Spare images in them.
How interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
David Freund wrote a longish comment, and it begins by saying, I have long been more interested in the knowledgeable about the Detroit cards and disappointed in my search for a book with numerous high-quality reproductions of them. David, I'm not quite sure what you meant by this, but could you expand a little bit?
Well, apparently it clipped off my the rest of my entry there, so naturally it's going to be a little mysterious. But I was just saying this may be old news to many people, but Michael Lagenstein and I had talked often about where are the beautiful reproductions of a book of reproductions of Detroit cards. And this may be a reflection of my naivete, but I only recently discovered a 1994 book, The Birth of a Century, Jim Hughes book on the Detroit photographs, reproductions of William Henry Jackson's work. And a lot of them are photographs and a lot of them are Detroit postcards, but it's a 1994 book, Jim Hughes. For those who aren't aware of it, I recommend it. It's really well printed. But the other comment that I did make, which was perhaps relevant to this, more relevant to this conversation, is that there's a German art historian, Thomas Elsesser, and I put a link in my comment that talks about the photo postcard's role in bringing modernist architecture into the popular culture. And I thought, it could tangentially be of interest to people, anyone who would want to consider the photo postcards or the postcards role culturally, rather than just data about the boats, because they're so massive and mysterious and intriguing. And this Elsesser book helped me in my own thinking about my own work, and I thought it might be of interest.
Yeah, there is a book by Taschen, which does profile the Detroit cards. Very large coffee table book. I'm not sure if it's available in the United States, but I actually bought this in Switzerland.
Oh, okay. I'll make a note. Thank you.
Katie Clark asks, how many of the ocean liners were torpedoed during World War I?
I don't have a number, but it is significant. And also smaller ships were torpedoed too, which would have had some passenger capacity on them. I mean, there were obviously the famous ones, such as the Lusitania or the SS Deutschland that got torpedoed. So they were targets. The German government warned passengers traveling eastbound on the Lusitania through a newspaper advertisement before they sunk the Lusitania.
Okay, Lynn Paulson wants to know where you've found all these cards.
Some maybe about 15%. I borrowed the images from the internet. I found them at shows. The York show, shows in New York City, on eBay, other shows that I traveled around to. I looked very diligently for these cards. There's some cards that I don't have because they're very expensive, or some cards, particularly real photo cards, don't turn up very often. But if you look hard enough, you can find them. But I expect they're increasingly scarce. There are many collectors of ocean liner material. I just limit myself to postcards.
Okay, Michael Block wants to know, why did they torpedo cruise ships?
Well, they were war target. I mean, there's speculation that the Lusitania was carrying war supplies. That's maybe why it went down so quickly. It was wartime, and anything was a target. Anything of the enemy was a target. Tragic, but real.
Let's see, Katie Clark again. I always learn something. Well, lots of things when Kyle Jolliffe speaks. I think that's just a pat in the back, Kyle.
I think so. Thanks, Katie. Much appreciated.
Jerry Dalsalenko, I guess I'm butchering her name, says thanks to their beautiful artwork and many of these earlier images. Phil McDaniel says, Kyle, do you know when regular air service began across the Atlantic?
I think it was about 1957. The planes would have gone to Gander, Newfoundland first, and then the second leg would have gone to England or France. But that's really the key year when things start to fall apart for the transatlantic ocean liner trade.
Okay, I've got a message here from Phil McDaniel, but he's cut off. Phil, could you tell me what you put on?
Well, that was my question, what he just answered right then, Bill. I did have one other question, though. Kyle, can you recommend, or do you know of any accounts from actual people that came across the Atlantic to better understand what conditions were like on these ships, from first class to, I guess, steerage was the lowest class and the cheapest. But are you aware of any good books that I could read to get a better grasp of what that was experience must have been like?
You might look at I think Rick Burns' History of New York City. I think I have it here. New York and Illustrated History. You might look at this book.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Using these ships as warships, they needed more boats during World War I, and quite often large yachts were taken over. And I know from here in San Diego, a lot of yachts were taken to be used as fighter ships and things like that. So it was very commonly used. I think that we just weren't taught about it. But in my research of different San Diegans, it was very common here.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the ocean liners, survive through these periods of war and come out stronger. But the final blow to them is transatlantic air travel. They do not recover from that. And I should point out the USS United States was built with possible conversion to a troop ship clearly in mind.
Yeah, I have one more question. Have you considered other avenues, sidebars, or whatever you might say about the boats? Because to me, they're so emotionally charged and so powerful in their presence and their importance in modern design and one thing and another. I mean, you obviously have narrowed your perspective so that it's manageable, because it could go on infinitely. But
Yeah.
there's so, I mean, just in my mechanical drawing class, we went to a boat repair dock at one point, and they had a screw up on a platform for repair, and it weighed multiple tons. There's this huge screw that drives the boat, and I touched it with my finger and could move it. And I remember that emotional element. And you talked about 1,000-foot ship, and I thought, that's 3 freaking football fields. That is so beyond imagination. And the informative and extensive knowledge you present, had you ever considered any other elements of of the uh, the boats that might be an addition to your, or an adjunct to your presentation?
Um, I guess not. I'm in my defense, I'm not a marine engineer, but um,
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm
it
not.
is it's an engrossing topic, and with uh many sidebars or rabbit holes you can go down.
Exactly.
Um, like the French brought French cuisine to America. They brought French Art Deco to America, through the Normandy while it was when it was in operation before the Second World War. There's many different influences. We saw one of those influences in that dinner theater card, the maiden voyage of the Normandy. I've my collecting style is to vacuum up all kinds of cards, and then if I do a presentation, to pull out, what seems to me to be important themes in them. I can't cover everything, but I think that quote I read by Jan Morris is important, because it's not just these ocean liners coming and going. There's an emotional connection. It's the same thing for train enthusiasts. When they see Big Boy, this very powerful Union Pacific locomotive in action, these sense of grace and style, in the extraordinary power that a locomotive engine like that generates. Or the same thing with these ships, slicing through the waves. And there's a real emotional connection. There's so many different aspects of the ocean liner story, because they were an essential part of the transatlantic connection, that had been established really, in the 1400s. If you go back to Christopher Columbus, or early settlement of America, that the ocean liners are advanced examples of the early wooden ships used by European nations to travel along their narrow coastlines. Or they're really no different than the Roman ships that are found submerged in the Mediterranean. They're just steel and with modern technologies. And
Pretty cool. It really is. Any other
yeah.
questions or comments?
Oh, yeah,
My
I'd
my
like to-
father during World War II was on he was in the medical corps. He ran a field hospital, and they were part of the North African invasion. And the ship he went over on was the Mauritania. And the ship had been completely stripped on the inside to hold, I think it was about 15,000 troops. So the ship was surrounded by protection and all because of the wolf packs. And he said the one thing they hadn't taken into consideration was the heat, because the ship left the New York area and went down to the southern tip of South America, then went across to Cape Town, then went up the coast of Africa to where it was disembarking the troops during the invasion. And he said the soldiers were so completely wasted by the heat that many of them were in awful condition by the time they got to the point to take part in the invasion. And it was the one thing they never planned, was the ship was going through the tropics. And but it was just a big cavernous thing on the inside full of hammocks. Seasickness, you name it. He said it was horrible. Being an officer, he was up on top. He ate in a dining room and had a cabin, but for the vast bulk of men, it was just murderous and fearful.
Yeah, the conditions on the troop ships were not easy. They, for the most part, weren't designed as troop ships. But government funding, like for the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth, was provided on the condition that, they could be converted into troop ships.
Mhm.
It was just a different way of fighting war then, in terms of mobilizing troops. And, it's significant that the word airline, has the same derivation, as ocean liner, which is really a regular succession of public conveyances plying between certain places. For example, in the dictionary, it says the Cunard line of steamers, from 1848. So we're just in a different age of transportation now, and circumstances sometimes aren't easy, but the ocean liners do play a vital transportation role, for 150 years between North America and Europe, and also between North America and Asia. My own grandparents as missionaries traveled to China on board Canadian Pacific steamships, and my mother's parents were in 1927 returned, or late 1926 returned on one of the German ocean liners. That's the way people traveled, before transatlantic jet service was available. People forget that it was a big deal, when DC-3 Sky Service became available, where you could travel within a couple days, from New York to California, or maybe even like one whole day, with a few stops along the way. So the world has changed faster than we think. But we can look at the ocean liners and just enjoy their beauty and grace, and the story that they convey, they tell in so many ways, such as the couple that were traveling in China as explorers, who met my father while he was a student. They tell so many stories, depending on what kind of story we're looking for.
Wonderful, wonderful. Any others? Go ahead.
You have if you have the time, let me talk to you about the Philadelphia area. The information I'm about to give you is sadly 20 years old, but I know it because my daughter Megan worked at the Independence Seaport Museum in Philadelphia along the Delaware River from 2000 to 2006. They have an extensive library of passenger diaries and naval diaries. So if you're interested in life at sea, and you're traveling on the East Coast, this would be a great place to visit and spend some time learning about life at sea. We also have the battleship New Jersey here in this area, and there's lots of other seaport related things in the Philadelphia city limits. So take that for what it's worth. And if you're ever in the Philadelphia area, I'd be pleased to be your guidepost or your tour guide.
Wow. Terrific. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I shoot in one more thing? Building on that last comment, which I thought when he mentioned diaries, and I remembered one of the cards that went by earlier in the presentation had, I believe it went by a little too quickly for me to read, but there was a message, I think it was by a child, which I wanted to read it because it seems so evocative. And I'm thinking, I totally understand. It's complete. It's a world study if you really get into boats, and I understand you have to draw some boundaries. But the idea of just a few comments from people who were on the boats who did things. I haven't seen anybody do this, like to edit some diaries and give maybe every 2 or 3 pages in a book, say, of just a couple comments from people or postcard messages could I mean, that last bit that you gave the quotation from the literature I found so engaging, and I thought, boy, I would that was probably prompted me and made me feel that I would look for more of that. But you've heard it. You'll do something, or you won't. It's like the comments I get on what I do. So,
And Jan Norris is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful writer. Just spectacular. I would recommend all of her books.
who's that?
Travel writer, amazing person.
Jan Morris.
Name. Tell us her name again.
Jan Morris.
Jan Morris.
Just for the story, the Andera Doria that sank in 1956
Yes.
was bringing gifts from my great grandparents to my mother, who just gave birth to me.
Oh,
Wow.
And they sank with the ship. And so they are at the bottom of the sea, whatever there was that they were sending her.
Oh dear.
oh my gosh. Amazing.
Yeah. So many different little sidebars of stories, and because just millions of people traveled on these ocean liners.
It just gives me goosebumps all over thinking about it. And I never thought about it until today that you said that the airplanes started going in 1957?
Well, transatlantic jet travel.
Okay.
I think it was with the DC-6 or.
My gosh, Eisenhower was in the White House for his second term. It's just amazing.
They were not killed, the transliner, immediately, because in 63, I went with my parents from Italy to Venezuela by ship.
Great. Yeah.
Jerry wanted to say something.
Yeah. Oh, no,
Well,
my father used to travel to Europe quite a bit just after the Second World War. And so he traveled on 2 of those ships that you mentioned, Kyle. He traveled on the Queen Elizabeth. I think he did that twice. And he traveled on the Queen Mary. He used to tell me about them a lot.
Wow.
And one of the things that really impressed was that they would have these lifeboat drills. So that every 2 or 3 days they would have a lifeboat drill, and they would all have to physically go to their place on the lifeboat, which would then be lowered into the water.
Oh.
And he was totally impressed with that. I don't have any postcards of them, unfortunately. I do have some ephemera that I found when I was cleaning up stuff. So I've got like photos and menus and like that.
True.
But there's really an extraordinary range of cards, many of as you've seen in this presentation, of a high quality.
What a nice afternoon we've had, and I thank you all for coming.